I created a mod for Minecraft to make myself a quarter of my normal size. Not only does this affect my hitbox, but it also means that I cannot jump up full blocks and I take more damage from everything. My only goal in this challenge is to beat the Ender Dragon. Let's see if I can do it. I spawned into the world right in the middle of a village, which was an amazing place to spawn since food is very difficult to get. Because I cannot jump up full blocks, it makes it very difficult to navigate around the world and kill animals for food, meaning that my main source of food would have to be wheat from hay bales. After looting the village and killing the golem, I crafted myself a bunch of slabs and a bucket to fill with water. These two things would be crucial if I had any hope of progressing through the game, since they would allow me to travel up blocks. After this, I spotted another village on top of a mountain in the distance and very slowly climbed my way up to the top, since the first village only had 2 hay bales. The second village was loaded with hay, as well as other types of food, pretty much guaranteeing me enough food for the rest of the challenge. Now that getting a decent food source was out of the way, I needed to find a way to get to the Nether that didn't involve mining obsidian, since finding diamonds would be very difficult and tedious given my limited movement and fragile player. Fortunately, this village had a large enough lava pool directly next to it, meaning I could go to the Nether as soon as I felt ready. I carefully built the portal by turning the lava into obsidian and lit it after crafting a flint and steel. Before going into the Nether, I wanted to ensure that I was well prepared. I put any items I knew I wouldn't need into a chest right next to the portal, and after crafting some more items and setting my spawn, I was ready to search for a fortress. As soon as I entered the Nether, I realized something that would make collecting blaze rods much more difficult. I'd completely forgotten that I was much more fragile than usual, and getting hit by a mob even once would be enough to kill me. I needed to be extra careful when collecting blaze rods because one wrong move could make me lose all of my items. I loaded into a basalt delta, which is probably the worst place I could have spawned given how rough the terrain is. Fortunately, there was a nether waste close by and I carefully made my way over there. I decided to go to the right, and while I was making my way through the biome, I slipped and fell directly into a lava block, burning all of my items in the process. Although this set me back a little bit, I had originally put some of my items in a chest in the overworld. After grabbing some of those, I made my way back to the Nether, making sure to avoid the lava this time. After traveling through the Nether for a little bit, I spotted a fortress in the distance. I was initially happy, but then I realized that I not only needed to navigate through the fortress without being attacked at all, but I also needed to somehow find a blaze spawner, since relying on stray blazes would take forever. I very carefully dug into the wall of the fortress, making sure to avoid any mobs, and buried myself under the floor so that I could tunnel through the fortress without being spotted. Now the only issue I needed to figure out was how could I possibly find a blaze spawner if I can't see above the floor. I know that it's possible to use the F3 menu to locate spawners, but I wasn't 100% sure how to do this. Instead, I decided to just tunnel through the fortress and explore for a little bit. While I was patching up some holes in the floor of my tunnel, I ended up running directly off the edge of the fortress and falling into more lava. It was so dark that it looked like my tunnel continued further than it did. I ended up losing all of my items once again, which was a much bigger deal this time. Although I still had some food and blocks in my overworld chest, I was running low, meaning that at some point I would need to find another source of food if I ever hoped to finish the challenge. I collected a bunch of stone and made some more tools, and once again made my way back into the Nether. Being extra careful this time, I continued tunneling through the fortress. I started tunneling on the outer wall instead, since that way I would be able to see part of the fortress as I went. To avoid any incidents like before, I made sure to block myself in so that I could not fall off the side. Finally, after around 45 minutes of searching, I found a blaze spawner. All I needed to do now was come up with a plan for gathering blaze rods without taking damage. I eventually settled on digging out the bottom of the spawner and sitting under some half slabs so the blazes couldn't reach me, and surprisingly, this worked very well. I was able to collect more than enough blaze rods and make it back to the overworld without taking any damage at all. It was at this point that I ran into another problem. In order to craft Eyes of Ender, we need both blaze powder and ender pearls. We already have the items we need in order to craft blaze powder, but we still needed to get the ender pearls. Originally, I wasn't super worried about this, but it proved to be much more tedious than collecting blaze rods. As I saw it, I had two options. I could either look for a warped forest in the Nether, or I could wander around in the overworld at night and look for endermen that way. I know clerics are able to trade ender pearls for emeralds, but I didn't have an easy way to get items to trade other villagers for those emeralds. I wasn't super thrilled about the idea of going back into the Nether, especially since I hadn't found a warped forest when I was exploring before, meaning it would take a long time and would be too risky to go in and look for one. I also didn't want to run around at night since my movement is very limited and the odds of getting attacked by other mobs are extremely high. So what do I do? Well, there was always the option of sitting in one spot at night, waiting for endermen to spawn, and then luring them over to me and getting pearls that way. This would definitely be the safest method, but would also be the most tedious since endermen don't spawn too frequently. I would have to sit there for hours just waiting for endermen to spawn. What I ended up doing was essentially this. However, I used the game's difficulty to my advantage. See, if you set the difficulty of the game to peaceful, all of the mobs will despawn. Then, setting the difficulty back to hard will allow mobs to spawn in again. I consider this to be a valid way of refreshing the spawns since it is technically a feature in the game. Whether you consider this to be a cheaty method or not, all it really did was speed up a very tedious process that I probably would have spent hours or days doing anyway, since it was safer than anything else I could think of. Before I got into this, I built myself a little house to keep myself safe. I also added a sort of lookout tower to the top so that I could search the area for endermen. Finally, I built a small farm to passively grow crops while I gathered ender pearls. Our food was running dangerously low at this point, and I needed to gather more before the dragon fight. Despite my efforts to speed up this process, it still took over 2 hours to get the pearls I needed, since I only averaged 1 or 2 pearls per night and had to wait the whole day to hunt again. Eventually, we got 12 pearls, the exact number required to fill an end portal. I was getting impatient and didn't bother getting any more. I figured that if one of the eyes broke on the way to the Stronghold, we would hopefully be able to find another pearl in a Stronghold chest. After crafting the Eyes of Ender, I started preparing for the dragon fight. I gathered more resources, collected the fully grown crops in my farm, and crafted tools. Although mobs deal a lot of damage to me normally, I figured that I'd probably be able to survive 1 or 2 hits with decent armor. I crafted myself an iron chestplate and iron leggings, hoping that would be enough. On the way to the Stronghold, I passed by a snowy biome and collected some snowballs. These would be extremely useful for breaking the end crystals since I don't have a bow and arrow. At long last, the eye finally led us to the Stronghold. I dug down and managed to find the portal room almost right away. After setting my spawn and filling the portal, it was time for the final boss of this challenge. I entered the portal and quickly bridged over to the main island. Since pillaring up to the crystals would take too long with slabs, I needed to find another way to get up there. I decided to use one of my water buckets to scale the side of each pillar, and once I got to the top, I would throw a snowball at the crystal while jumping back down, preventing me from dying in the explosion. This took a while, but I eventually broke all of the end crystals. All that was left to do was to take down the dragon. Surprisingly, defeating the dragon was easier than breaking all of the crystals. All I needed to do was hide underneath it and swing my sword at its head. After a few minutes, the dragon had been defeated and the challenge was complete. One tiny little man was able to take down a big fearsome dragon. This challenge took me around 4 hours to complete, which is a lot less than I initially thought. The movement options were extremely limited due to the inability to jump up full blocks, but it was fun to come up with ways to get around that. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot and you can always change your mind later. If you have any suggestions for future challenges, feel free to leave a comment down below letting me know what you'd like to see next. I mainly play Pokemon and Mario games, but I'm open to new ideas. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.